82% of politically obsessed elites believe that people like you agree with them on most issues. We'll look at that and other delusions of the political elites today on The Scott Rasmussen Show. Welcome to The Scott Rasmussen Show. I'm Scott, and joining me today is Edie Hill. Good morning, Edie.
Good morning, Scott, and welcome. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we are going to be talking about the Trump trial, America's thoughts on the presidential debate, and more in Rasmussen's Roundup. We'll take an exclusive look into the delusions of the politically obsessed elite and hear what they think is happening in the minds of the rest of us. But first, it's time for Scott's thoughts. So what is on your mind this week?
Millions of Americans these days are seething with anger at their government. And let's face it, they have good reason to be. Most voters see the federal government as a threat to individual freedom, individual rights. They don't believe the government is serious about securing the southern border, and they're upset about attacks on freedom of speech. Unfortunately, some political leaders, seeing this anger, well, they just encourage their base supporters to vent their anger, let their rage out. And the end result is actions that often do more harm than good. A better approach, and the only way to move our nation forward, would be for leaders to show people how to channel that anger in a productive way. The best role model in recent history, Martin Luther King's leadership during the Montgomery bus boycott. Now, most people, when they think of Dr. King, they think of his I Have a Dream speech or some other eloquent speeches that he gave. But the most amazing part of his leadership was the way he led his own team, his own angry base. He encouraged them and disciplined them to channel their anger in a way that achieved lasting change. Now, when Rosa Parks was arrested for not giving up her seat in a bus, the black community in Montgomery was angry, and they had good reason to be. But rather than just letting that anger explode into violence, King and his team organized a boycott of the bus system. And that was a big challenge because the black community relied on the buses to get to work. So King spent a lot of his time explaining the strategy, reassuring people that this was heading in the right direction. Well, the boycott was so successful that city leaders responded with what we would today call lawfare. When black taxi drivers helped get some of these people to work instead of taking the bus, they were penalized. So the black community organized a carpool system. They had 300 cars that were driving workers to different places of employment, maids and cooks and others, so that they didn't have to ride the bus. Guess what? The city made ride-sharing services illegal. This went on. People had to walk to work every single day for a year to sustain the boycott. Rain or shine. This is where King's leadership was the most important. Again, he gave people hope. He had a plan to back it up. Part of the problem, though, the city kept on going. King and 80 others were arrested based on an ancient law that was dug up just for the occasion. And then Martin Luther King Jr.'s home was bombed. He knew at that moment that if the anger exploded, everything they had done would have been in vain. So King, after the bombing of his own home and one of his colleagues, worked to keep the anger channeled in the right direction. What he did, and this is remarkable, his statement was, "Be calm, as I and my family are. We are not hurt." Can you imagine a political leader saying that today, telling their base, "My home was just bombed, but I want you to remain calm. I want you to stick to the plan." And King added, "Remember that if anything happens to me, there will be others to take my place." Well, ultimately, it took a year before the Supreme Court ruled that segregated seating on buses were unconstitutional. It was a year of King continually challenging his own supporters to remain disciplined and to channel their anger. It was a combination of nonviolent protest and Christian ethics that carried the day. Political leaders today could learn from this. They've got to do more than encourage their supporters to get mad and vent their rage. Real leadership is much, much harder. It requires providing your supporters with a credible strategy, one that can work, and one that gives them hope. And then even more than that, it requires keeping your base disciplined so that they channel their anger in the right direction. That's the leadership America needs today. It's the only way we can bring about the positive change that's needed. Those are my thoughts for this week.
Yeah, Dr. King is even more unique in the culture today, what we see. So look at the protests on the campuses. You had people who were yelling, chanting for change, but no real cohesion, no one who led them well. It just seemed like a lot of anger.
Well, and by the way, that proves the point, because once the campus protests began, support for Israel in the U.S. went up.
As soon as it got violent, especially.
Right.
I mean,
That's
when
right.
you see it. But you see it just a lot of knee-jerk, or leaders come in and they drop in. Wherever there's, something explodes, we're dropping in there, we give a press conference, and then they're gone.
Nothing is easier than when somebody's angry to just feed their anger, throw them red meat, tell them to yell louder. That's easy, and it may make somebody feel good for a moment, but it doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't provide change, and it doesn't really work towards finding solutions for serious problems.
And remember, what also happened in that story of the Montgomery bus boycott was Dr. King knew that if the word got out to the rest of the country what was going on, he would win in the court of public opinion. Because what was happening was he was demonstrating who the bad guys were. He was demonstrating we are behaving appropriately within the American stream. We are protesting, we are boycotting, but we are behaving ourselves, and look at how they're responding. He also, by the way, right from the start, he relied on his faith. He was a Baptist preacher. That was part of his message. But he also spoke of the American dream, the nation that we live in. He was calling people to their highest ideal.
We turn our attention to the highly influential in America, the politically obsessed elite 1%, and some explosive new research sponsored by the Napolitan Institute. This elite is wildly out of touch with most Americans. They don't see it that way, though. They think we all see it the same way they do. According to the numbers, that is delusional. So, Scott, tell us about this. First, let's start with who they are.
Yeah, I think that's always a good reminder. The elite 1%, they have a postgraduate degree, they live in densely populated urban areas, and we're not talking Des Moines here or Cedar Rapids. We're talking 10,000 people per square mile or more, and they make more than $150,000 a year. And within this group, there's the ones we call the politically obsessed elites. These are members of the elite 1% who talk politics every single day. And they tend to think that most of the America is a reflection of them. In fact, 82% of the politically obsessed elites say that most Americans share their views on key issues. Not even close.
Well, I suppose if they talk to everybody in their little social circle, they might, but the rest of America, different story.
That's right. Let's start with a really basic thing. 71% of the politically obsessed elites think most Americans trust the federal government most of the time. That hasn't been true for 50 years.
No, and it's like trust but verify. You like to think that you trust the government and can trust the government, but it's not something that I think most of us automatically assume is the right choice.
No, in fact, in today's world, only 22% actually trust the federal government most of the time.
Yeah.
Now, here's another one. This one surprises folks in D.C. 66% of the elites think most Americans think their own representative in Congress is the best person for the job.
And instead, you're looking at the representative thinking, don't I have another pick?
That's right. The storyline in D.C. is always, well, people hate Congress, but they love their own representative. That's not the truth. Only 1 out of 4 voters believe their own representative is the best person for the job. And about half think their own representative trades votes for cash. They just look at the entire system as corrupt.
Wait, did you poll just in New Jersey this week?
No. This is everywhere in America, even here in Texas. And by the way, part of the problem is most don't think their congressmen will listen to them. But again, if you're in the elite, you're thinking people trust the government, they love their own representative in Congress, the system is working. They also tend to believe, 2 out of 3 of them, that we are all willing to pay at least $250 a year for climate change, for green energy programs. And when we ask the question, this is pay more in higher taxes or in higher prices.
Yeah, and that I just do not understand. I'm willing to, you give me an option, I'll change my own behavior if I can to benefit the greater good. But when you tell me that you want me to give money to something or someone and let them figure out how to do it, again, it goes back to that difference in the elite 1%. Government can fix it all.
While these people think most Americans are willing to pay this much, about half of all voters say they're not willing to pay a dime. And 72% say well, even if we have to pay a little, it's not going to be more than $100 a year. This is a big difference when you start thinking about all the proposals that have come out.
Yeah.
What about the gun issue? You know, we talked about this last week.
Yes.
A majority of the politically obsessed elites believe that most voters want to live in communities where guns are outlawed. That is simply not the case. But you know why they have this view? It's because 70% of the the politically obsessed elites want to live in a community like that. Here's another one. A majority of the politically obsessed elite think that most voters are okay with regulations to ban the sale of gas-powered cars.
And that is not the case.
No, I mean, it's not even close, especially in areas where you have to drive.
Yeah, and say you're in the middle of Wyoming or Montana or Texas or Kansas or a million places. And, you know, the gas-powered car is here.
Right, it's here.
To stay.
Well, and someday we may have electric vehicles, but it'll come because the situation has changed.
I drive one, but you got to pick and choose when you do.
That's right. Now, here's the last one. This is not a majority, but 41% of the politically obsessed elites think that most voters want biological males who consider themselves to be female. They think they should be allowed to play in women's sports. Most voters reject this completely. Edie, this is just, another example of a bubble that people were in. The elites in general and the politically obsessed elites in particular, they are wildly out of touch with America.
What's happening with the presidential debate?
Well, most people aren't paying attention. We asked a poll, we do this a lot. Have you heard about these presidential debates? When are they going to be held? 42% said they just don't know. Now, about a third of voters did guess that it's next month. Some of them probably knew for certain. Another 15% were saying, well, we know it's coming, but they guessed the wrong month. So the bottom line is voters aren't talking about this a whole lot. And part of the reason is more than 80% of them say there's nothing they're going to learn. They already know enough about the candidates.
Sometimes when you tune into them, you hear more of the commentators, giving their opinion in the form of a question than you really seem to get from the candidates themselves.
Well, that's right, and that's why the media loves it so much. But most voters say, guess what? It'd be better if the TV host would talk less and the candidates would talk more. In fact, if you went back to the very first presidential debate on TV, the candidates had up to 9 minutes to respond to questions. Most voters think it'd be good to hear the candidates talk that long these days.
Yeah, can they?
Well, that's a different
I think
issue.
Everything's so focused on a short sound bite
Right.
that you don't really seem to get to a lot of the meat.
That's right. And no campaign manager would let that happen anyhow. That's part of the reason the debates have become so meaningless.
Now, something that has obviously everybody's been focusing on, I think, the Trump trial.
Not everybody. Only
Really?
18% of voters are following news about the trial very closely. And among those who are undecided, who don't know if they're going to vote for Kennedy or Trump or Biden, only 6% of them are paying attention all that closely. I think the reality is Donald Trump is not running for sainthood. Nobody envisions him that way. This is not new information about former President Trump.
I'll tell you something that was a huge uproar in my household was when my daughter, the college student, came racing into the room. Mom, did you hear the soundbite from Harrison Butker, the NFL kicker? Did you hear that graduation speech? I was like, no, not yet. Then I found out, okay, he said a lot.
He did say a lot, and it's rare for an NFL kicker to make news, and you kind of wonder how this became a story in the first place.
Well, it did, and I mean, at some point, even Andy Reid came out, and he had to make a statement about what Butker had said at the college commencement.
Right.
Let's listen to him.
What do you tell them if they come to you with a concern about players speaking ill of, women in general?
Yeah, that hasn't happened. I don't think he was speaking ill to women, but he has his opinions, and we all respect that. I let you guys in this room, and you have a lot of opinions that I don't like. So.
I do love the way he ended that. I let you guys in the room, and I don't like your opinions either.
It's Andy Reid,
That's right. But Patrick Mahomes also came out and said, I know this man. I judge him by the character of what I see every day. 71% of voters are saying the NFL should let their players speak their minds.
Well, I'm sure they have codes of conduct, but I think that when you take a look at this out of the context,
Sure.
That's when it is so glaring and so shocking. When you take a look at it in the context of his faith, of the place where he was giving this commencement speech, it's a whole different ballgame.
And the fact that he was saying, I've won 3 Super Bowls, but that's not the most important part of my life. But more than that, why are we picking apart things that people are saying, policing their speech at every moment?
Now is your time. You get to join our conversation. We invite you to scan the QR code that's at the lower part of your screen right now. It's going to take you to a web page where you can ask Scott anything you want about the challenges, the opportunities, anything really facing our nation. And last week we invited you to do just that. You did not disappoint. So Scott, we picked a question from the mailbag. One of the viewers asked the following, very good one. Why is there this push to relieve student loan debt, but then we still have student loan programs?
You know, Edie, part of the problem or part of the fact is that voters want to help kids get to college. They, especially if somebody can't afford to go, they don't want that to be the reason they don't get a degree. But the issue is far more complex. About half of voters say, you know, it'd be better if kids worked their way through college and took 8 years to get a degree rather than getting a 4 degree and having some student loans. We also know voters think it'd be better to spend money making sure that everybody who graduates from high school has the skills they need to get a job and function as an adult, rather than putting money into student loans. So the short answer is, why does it still happen? Because people want to make sure everybody has a chance to succeed, but they're open to other ideas.
Well, it's the way we feel in America. You want to give people who need help,
Right.
but you want to do it wisely, smart way. So this weekend, big weekend for America. We observe Memorial Day, and it's an observance, of course, where we honor the lives of the people who have sacrificed so much just so that we can be here and have all of the opportunities that we do in this great country. So what can you tell us about this very, very important holiday and what it means?
And let's start with the fact that it's for those who have given their lives for our country. This is not Veterans Day. This is a special day. And 44% of voters say it's one of the most important holidays that we celebrate in our nation. So that's a pretty significant portion, and about half say they're going to do something special to celebrate. What makes me a little sad, and I have to confess I'm part of the problem here, is that a lot of people tend to think of Memorial Day more as the unofficial start of summer rather than as a day to commemorate those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. So when we ask people what they're going to do, they're going to spend time with family and friends. They're going to have a barbecue. Only 18% will actually take a part in a parade or some other event commemorating this day.
Well, maybe while we're with family and friends, we can think about the people who have given everything for us.
Yes.
So what is the number not to forget this week?
82% of the politically obsessed elites say that they think most of America agrees with them on most important issues. Nothing could be further from the truth. Their ideas, their views are wildly out of touch with the rest of America. But when they look to see the country, well, they think they're looking in a mirror. They think the rest of us are just like them.